What is our common bond truly? Freedom. Freedom. Without freedom, you can't be a Christian no matter what denomination you belong to. You can't be a Buddhist. You can't own a donut shop. You can't drive from here to Oregon. You can't be an American because that's what it's all about, and that's the only thing that it's all about. Nothing else. Nothing else. You don't really understand sometimes what a terrible burden it is to know some of the things that I know and try to wake people up and impart this knowledge to them and find out that they just have walls built in front of them. They want to be slaves. That's why my broadcast scares the hell out of socialists. You see, what happens when you broadcast the truth is you piss everybody off.
I maintain that the only true salvation from any oppression or enslavement is self-empowerment, knowledge, consciousness. This is true rebellion. Don't get caught up in the 87% of people who follow the leader. People who think that they are rebels because they denounce authority simply because it's the latest fashion. Don't march the streets claiming that you are the enlightened one because you read a book or saw a film that gave you a glimpse into an uncommon knowledge. Don't scream phrases into a megaphone that you borrowed from another person's research. And don't proclaim yourself an original thinker because you belong to a group that represents an unpopular belief. Those are all examples of the other side of the coin of groupthink, leading a false rebellion. False rebellion is dangerous because it gives the illusion that you are free and thinking for yourself. A true rebellion, a true revolution, begins when you quit following and start leading. And those who end up following you should be taught by you to quit following you and start leading. And the only way to lead successfully is by fully understanding your rights as a human being on this planet. We have very powerful tools on our side called the Bill of Rights and the Constitution. These documents state that no government can deprive us of our natural rights. So how is it happening? You must understand that the elite group controlling our government, our educational system, agriculture, and media are also in control of our free enterprise. Free enterprise is our economic system or our means of production, privately owned and operated for personal benefit. Free enterprise cannot legally be taxed unless it volunteers itself. The reason why income tax seems inescapable is because most every job on the planet requires you to sign a number of documents with fancy wording stating that you are agreeing to be a representative of a corporation or entity. What all of this means is simply that when you sign working papers, which are required by pretty much every employer that you apply to, you are waiving your rights as a natural person protected under the Constitution and agreeing to represent an artificial person that is not protected under the Constitution. It's difficult to avoid because if you do not sign the document waiving your rights, you won't get the job. So why does every employer voluntarily pay taxes, which leads to the requirement of those documents? Because without doing so, the business loses all state and federal benefits provided to private or commercial business. And furthermore, most people simply accept the mistruth that income tax is required by law without investigating it. When your name is presented on a document with the first letter of your first and last name capitalized, it represents capitis diminutia minima, which occurs when a man's family relations alone were changed. It's a minimal loss of rights. When your last name appears in capital letters, it represents capitis diminutia media, which occurs when a man loses his rights of citizenship but not his rights to liberty. This means you can be fined and penalized but not enslaved or imprisoned. But when your entire name is capitalized on any document, it represents capitis diminutia maxima, which states that a man's condition changes from freedom to bondage. All rights of citizenship and family rights are surrendered. This means you can be fined, imprisoned, and enslaved in any amount for any duration at the whim of the state's suggestion. But it is important to note that if you do not legally bind yourself to these documents stating that you waive your rights and represent a corporation, you do not have to attend any court.
There are two kinds of law on the earth, as I've said. One is called civil law, which is the law of the land, and one is called maritime admiralty, which is called the law of water. The maritime admiralty is banking law. So consequently, the corporation and government and people who want to control you, they create a second you, and that second you that they control, that they created, is all capital letters. Check it out. Anytime you get a bill, you get a lawsuit, you get a fine, a ticket, somebody sends you a bill from the Department of Water and Power, check it out on your driver's license, on your Social Security card, on your insurance cards. Your name will always be in all capital letters, because only all capital letters can be dealt with by banks and government. You need to wake up and find out how this stuff really works. Because once you understand that you don't need to submit yourself as an American to a British commercial venture called courts. You're an American. You don't need to go to court. There's nobody. You only go to court because you agreed to go to court. When they send you a subpoena to court or a summons to court, and they've sent you something, you look at it and say, hey, Jack, that's not me. That's in all capital letters. All capital letters is a corporation.
Those who are charged under these maritime admiralty courts usually don't understand that they are voluntarily being fined and imprisoned. When a judge calls your name and asks if you are that name, those who say yes are verbally agreeing to represent the artificial person that the name represents. In doing so, you are voluntarily waiving your rights under the Constitution. Your absolute rights as natural persons are the right to life, security, and property. And all of these are very important. Remember that you can never be deprived of these simple rights unless you are willingly waiving them. But you need to understand your rights if you want to be protected under them. When sustainable development is knocking down your door for the right to your property, you need to understand your inherent right to your property, which extends from the visible surface to the center of the earth. But please note that these steps are simply the beginning. They merely treat the symptoms instead of attacking the root. To understand fully how to protect yourself, you need to understand your origin. The true history of this planet has been stifled from the top down. Since the inception of monotheism and the ridicule as well as the outlaw in specific cultures of all pagan religions and practices, a lie has been forced upon all civilizations. You have to wonder why powerful empires were threatened enough by paganism to make the practice of such religions punishable by death. This threat didn't end during the Roman Empire. Take a look at how the founders of America, by mandate of Great Britain, wiped out Native American tribes indiscriminately. Great Britain has been known to show some of the most brutal forms of genocide in Africa, India, New Zealand, New Guinea, and many other locations which pagan tribes still existed. East Timor suffered one of the worst genocides in all of history, and was fueled by the United Nations and United States funding during the Carter administration. The last thing that the elite power wants is a sovereign group or tribe setting a positive example for others. But keep in mind that followers of monotheistic religions are not to blame, just as not all members of Freemasonry intelligence agencies, fraternal orders, or political organizations are part of the esoteric agenda that is being carried out. And it is difficult for most to comprehend, but paganism is no more dangerous than understanding surgical procedures. The knowledge can be very useful when applied properly, yet it can also have detrimental effects if misused or abused. Understand that most all of these problems are not by mistake, but by design. Most common people do not understand that colors, shapes, catchwords or phrases, and biological cycles are all used as talismans to affect humanity on a psychological and emotional level, at the level of consciousness. Colors are used hypnotically in every news channel and corporate advertisement. Fast food chains typically use vibrant reds, yellows, and whites in their restaurants to cause the customers to feel hurried and restless. This in turn causes customers to filter in and out quicker to make way for more customers. Simple business. However, fine dining restaurants make their money on a peaceful experience, so they use very earthy, natural colors such as soft greens, blues, and browns to calm the senses and make for a lengthy and peaceful meal. The same goes for the music that is played at these establishments. Specific musical notations and progressions can give relaxing or exciting stimuli to the body without our knowledge. The music industry goes even further and uses natural rhythms of the heart to map out the tempo of pop songs. But music is not a product of our culture. In 1986, the National Academy of Science found that infants prefer consonant sounds such as perfect fifths rather than dissonant ones. This is just a small example of how our natural ability to understand the math of music comes innately. So be mindful when placing a child in front of a TV or near a stereo. Those who believe that children cannot comprehend violence on the TV screen or aggression from music are thinking strictly with the left brain. The child may not rationally understand the words or actions on the screen, but the right brain, even in infants, can absolutely understand everything in its immediate environment, because it transmits a frequency that can affect us on a subatomic level. Science has even proven that proper sonic vibrations are essential for the health of vegetation. Studies done on many ecosystems have shown that when a species becomes extinct, another species will come in and replace the song pattern to fit the overall harmony of the vibrations required for that plant life to thrive. All of these are known as talismans and are used very carefully by corporations and media. Catchphrases are also used to spark certain emotions in the psyche. When an average person hears the words terror, bombing, guns, murder, the body and mind respond with heightened alertness and caution. And when events such as assassinations of major leaders, bombings, terrorism, or war happen on large scales throughout the world, the body responds differently at different times. The tragic events involving the Branch Davidians at Waco and the Oklahoma City bombing claimed the lives of men, women, and children as they ended in flames on April 19th. This is a pagan holiday where human sacrifice is made by fire. The tragic events of September 11th, 2001 happened on the Mayan calendar date of 6 epochs, which represents large-scale change. And then, when the U.S. attacked Afghanistan on October 7th, 2001 in retaliation, this was the Mayan calendar date of 6K, which represents balancing. 2 pagan holidays identical to 2 large-scale media events. Were the people supposed to see the best show of their lives all over the media? Who knows what the amazing media coverage of these events did to the collective psyche? These large events are not by chance. One needs only to look at the result of the major political decisions of the United States since the inception of the United Nations to catch a glimpse of the ultimate goal. Every major war, assassination, terrorist attack, or security weakness exposed has 2 specific common themes. The unfortunate event makes worldwide news and scares or angers the public, and the result, no matter what, is always the expansion of government and the destruction of constitutional freedoms. It doesn't matter what the excuse or explanation is, the result always tells the truth. A child can give the greatest excuse every time he is too sick for school, but if it always happens on the day of a test, the truth is revealed by the result. Likewise, the major media outlets can give every explanation in the book as to why war is declared, assassinations happen, and terrorist events take place, but if they all end up in the expansion of government and the destruction of constitutional freedoms for the people, the truth is revealed by the result. And because the vast majority of the public are completely ignorant of the natural biological cycles within us, it is increasingly difficult for them to accept that these events are by no means an accident.
David, he believes that you're fixing to hit us tonight, he says.
No, we are not fixing to hit you. That is not true. Nobody's coming in there.
Okay.
You got my word, it's solid, it's 1,000% absolute, okay? Hello? Hello? No, honey, nobody's gonna come and kill you.
Are they gonna come and kill me?
No. No. Nobody's coming.
I believe that using CS gas against infants, against old people with respiratory problems, there were 60, 70-year-old men in there, and there were young children. That's torture. And I can just see those kids barfing, vomiting, screaming, because you can't possibly have a gas mask that'll fit a little kid.
Didn't their reports say that gas masks don't fit on these babies?
That's correct.
And didn't they know that?
They should have known that.
You know, we were told they weren't going to be shooting, and yet they're firing what amounted to mortars or rockets at us, these ferret rounds, which sounded like a mortar.
Were you afraid?
Yes.
These pieces of equipment were unarmed, as I understand it, and were contracted. I mean, it was like a good rent-a-car.
A good rent-a-car? A tank going into a building?
When the governmental agency made a decision to breach holes into the building, they set up a configuration of a pot-bellied stove. If you wanted to burn slow, you close off the vents. If you wanted to burn fast, you open it up. Well, they made a configuration in that building that was consistent to a pot-bellied stove.
Infraspection analysts noticed the same flash. Quote, a portion of the video showed a flash or pyrotechnic explosion in one portion of the building. End quote. This pyrotechnic projectile was one of two found in the rubble of Mount Carmel. It is a 40-millimeter incendiary device that is fired from a handheld grenade launcher.
Was an explosion at 9 o'clock this morning that did that damage you're looking at right there.
I just took a look down the street at the Morrow building again. I see another bomb truck going, so apparently they're going to try to get out that third bomb that's been talked about.
I've been told by the police department that just as soon as those bombs are defused, they will permit the medical teams to enter.
Now, we're also hearing from some witnesses on the scene that they've overheard from firefighters that were first on the scene that there was a possibility that there was a secondary explosive device besides the car bomb device outside the building, and that that device may have been placed near the nursery.
Also, we're getting word now that President Clinton is sending
anti-terrorism units down here to look over the situation to find out exactly what went on and what other danger may be out there in Oklahoma City. That's something we need to think about, unfortunately, this time, because, as we've told you, 2 other explosive devices were found that were not detonated, and they were larger than the first.
Right now, they are saying that this is the work of a sophisticated group. This is a very sophisticated device, and it has to have been done by an explosives expert.
Talk to any police official anywhere, and pretty soon he'll bring up the shootout. February 1997. 2 bank robbers in full body armor and firing AK-47s did battle with police on the streets of North Hollywood, California. It was every officer's worst nightmare come true. Cops outgunned by the bad guys. After the LA shootout, requests for surplus machine guns increased dramatically. The Los Angeles Police Department alone got 600 M16s from surplus. Nationwide, the number given away more than doubled this year, and many departments decided to issue them to regular patrol officers on daily duty, all because of one shootout in one city.
But you understand, I'm not here representing the NRA. I'm not even a member. Okay? Secondly, I'd like to say that in your opening statements, you commented specifically on my testimony, saying that basically it had nothing to do with this issue. And I had to chuckle because then I noticed you had Mr. Brady up here, who was hit not with an assault weapon, but with a .22 caliber revolver. So getting beyond that, a couple of years ago, my parents and I went to a cafeteria in Texas on a bright sunny day. We weren't in a dark alley where we weren't supposed to be. And as you all know the story, this madman drove his truck through the window. And he began shooting. Well, immediately, my father and I got down on the floor and put the table up in front of us. And this guy kept shooting. And you're thinking, what could it be? Is it a robbery? That's the first thing that generally comes to mind. And he keeps shooting. It took me a good 45 seconds to realize that this man wasn't there to commit a robbery. He wasn't there for a hit. He was there to simply shoot as many people as he possibly could. I can tell you that I'm not mad at the guy that did this. As he continued, it was obvious that he was a madman. My father, at that point, said, I've got to do something. I've got to do something. He's going to kill everybody in here. And he rushed the man. No way. The guy turned, shot him in the chest. He went down, was obviously mortally wounded. For whatever reason, that made the man change directions and go off to my left. Shortly thereafter, someone at the back of the restaurant broke out a window. When I saw what looked like an opportunity to escape, I turned around and I grabbed my mother by the shirt and I said, come on, we've got to run, we've got to get out of here. And then my feet grew wings and I was out the back window. As soon as I got out, I realized that my mother had not followed me out. And as I learned from the police officers, she had crawled over to where my father was and cradled him until the guy got back around to her, put the gun to her head. She looked up at him, put her head down, and he pulled the trigger. My parents had just had their 47th wedding anniversary. She wasn't going anywhere. As I mentioned, I'm not really mad at the guy that did this. And I'm certainly not mad at the guns that did this. They didn't walk in there by themselves and pull their own triggers. The guy that did it was a lunatic. That's like being mad at a rabid dog. I'm mad at my legislators for legislating me out of the right to protect myself and my family. I would much rather be sitting in jail with a felony offense on my head and have my parents alive. As far as these so-called assault weapons, you say that they don't have any defense use. You tell that to the guy that I saw on a videotape of the LA riots, standing up on his rooftop, protecting his property and his life from an entire mob with one of these so-called assault weapons. Tell me that he didn't have a legitimate self-defense use. Just one final statement. I've been sitting here getting more and more fed up with all of this talk about these pieces of machinery having no legitimate sporting purpose, no legitimate hunting purpose. People, that is not the point of the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment is not about duck hunting. And I know I'm not going to make very many friends saying this, but it's about our right, all of our right, to be able to protect ourselves from all of you guys up there.
What is at stake is more than one small country. It is a big idea, a new world order, where diverse nations are drawn together in common cause to achieve the universal aspirations of mankind.
The soldiers that you see before you represent not the past, but rather the future. It is through exercises such as this that truly we can create a new world order.
The daily life we perceive with our five senses is not reality. Quantum physics has shown that space and time are illusions of perception. Therefore, our bodies cannot truly be a reality if they occupy this space.
Ernest Rutherford performed an experiment in Manchester that revealed to him the shape of the interior of an atom. Scientists were shocked to discover that the atom is almost entirely empty space. The question then became, how could this empty atom possibly make the solid world around us?
Our true consciousness does not exist in our brains or in our bodies. But this illusion of our individual bodies, along with the misinformation of our true origins, has manifested the idea that we all think independently from one another. With this misunderstanding, it would seem impossible to scientifically explain telepathy, clairvoyance, spiritual mediums, and other phenomena dealing with transferring information between sources without physical means of communication. But when you understand that there is a common spiritual bond between all things in the universe, and that we are all part of one divine intelligence, no phenomena is unexplainable. This simple understanding fills all the holes in modern religions. It explains reincarnation, déjà vu, predictions of the future, and literally every event, occurrence, or anomaly ever experienced. The blank matter within the most basic building blocks of perceivable existence is malleable and molded by intent. This means that consciousness shapes our reality. This seems difficult to accept for most, and it is quite understandable. In modern times, we are taught from an early age how to think rationally and tangibly. This is a very left-brain method of education, and it has more harmful effects than is given credit for. The left brain deals with logic, details, facts, patterns, practicality, science, and math, as the right brain deals with feeling, intuition, symbols, images, risk-taking, philosophy, and religion. With a deliberate push for government-controlled educational curriculums, generation after generation of the youth are being taught to focus only on the facts, figures, and numbers. Repetition is used to train children subconsciously to accept what they're learning. Children aren't rewarded for questioning the validity of the information they receive. They are ridiculed. However, the children who blindly accept the information as true and merely regurgitate the information on command when it is time to take a test, those children go on to become the decision makers in our government, law, medicine, business, and every other occupation with power and prestige. The most detrimental effect of being pushed away from holistic thinking with the full brain into a strictly left brain thought is what is known as the suppression of the feminine. Every male and female have both feminine and masculine qualities. It has nothing to do with man or woman. These are represented by the left and right brain, yin and yang, black and white, light and dark, and most every other duality. Both are vital to our spiritual and physical health. In ancient Egypt, the female was the rightful heir to the throne. The male she chose to marry became pharaoh. This depicted the goddess tradition that has been destroyed to make way for a patriarchal, male-dominated society we see enforced in every major denomination. In suppressing the feminine of every society and pushing the people to strictly left-brain thinking, the natural ability for humanity to feel earthly, cosmic, and personal energy became lost. Traditions that were passed on through shamans, witch doctors, magicians, psychics, and seers of all kind became outlawed and ridiculed and given a stigma of something out of a Hollywood movie. Every religion explains that we are children of God and have godliness inside of us. If you erase the anthropomorphized God and understand that God is nothing more than the spiritual web that connects all things, all religious scriptures begin to make much more sense. Our bodies are merely vessels to contain our spirit, to gather experience for the divine mind. This is how evolution is possible. It is scientifically proven that all species are evolving into more complex beings. Innate knowledge or racial memory within all species is the understanding of newborns of all kinds to automatically know specific details and traits that the mother does not have to teach them. Therefore, innate knowledge helps every species naturally evolve towards more complex organisms. Lyle Watson claims that it was a Japanese scientist who observed the 100th monkey effect in 1952. In this observation, he discovered that a certain portion or percentage of monkeys learned or developed a new trait. The knowledge became an innate ability in that species. This is further testimony to a collective consciousness among species. Everything in existence has a natural vibration to it, from our atoms all the way to the vastness of the universe. To show a simple connection between the earth and our bodies, take a look at our body's harmonic focal points, better known as our chakras. Just as there are harmonic focal points on a guitar string, there are locations within our body where our vibrations culminate. In Eastern philosophies, these 7 chakras are used to bring health and balance to the physical and spiritual body. Our Earth also has 7 chakra points at equally distant locations from one another. There is 1 chakra point on each continent. The root chakra is in Mount Shasta, California. The sexual chakra is in the Isle of Sun, Lake Titicaca in South America. The solar plexus chakra is in Uluru Juta in Australia. The heart chakra is in Glastonbury or Shaftesbury, England. The throat chakra is where the Great Pyramids of Giza in Egypt are. The third eye chakra is in Kuhe Malaxia in Iran. And the crown chakra is at Mount Kailas in Tibet. Scientifically, this is explained because at the core of our Earth, there is a molten iron crystal that resonates at approximately 7 Hertz. There are energy vortexes all over the Earth where electromagnetic energy emanates. There are also several vile vortices surrounding the equator where strange anomalies occur, such as radio and compass malfunctions, as well as plane and ship disappearances. You may have heard of a few of these. So the intangible parts of our existence, such as emotions, are part of the true reality of higher consciousness. If emotions are part of a realm that we cannot experience with our 5 senses, then how is it that we are all aware of our emotions? What most people believe to be emotions are not truly the emotion itself. What we are experiencing is the physical manifestation of these emotions. Anger causes disturbance in the psyche, which manifests itself in the ego. These manifestations cause the heart rate to increase, body temperature to rise, and spawn many other physical traits that signify anger. Just as music from the radio is a physical manifestation of an intangible signal, our experience of emotion is the physical manifestation of an intangible signal as well. It has been shown that our emotions have a vibratory frequency to them. Furthermore, there are only 2 emotions that humankind experiences: fear and love. All other emotions branch either directly or indirectly from these 2 emotions. Fear has a long and slow frequency vibration to it, while love has a very rapid and high frequency. To show that vibration is the very foundation of existence, Hans Jenne developed what is known as cymatics in the 1940s to show that when vibrations of sound are passed through a form of media, there is a set pattern that will follow. When the frequency increases, the media develops into a more complex pattern. This is precisely what is happening to our Earth and to humanity. There are 64 possible codes of amino acids in our DNA structure made from 4 elements: carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, and nitrogen. By any means of logic, we should have all 64 codes activated within our DNA structure, yet we presently only have 20 active codes.
And of these 64 possibilities, it appears that only 20 of these codes are turned on right now for us, the 20 amino acids. There is a switch that turns off and turns on where those coding sites lie, and that the switch for that turning off and turning on is what we call emotion. And this is the first time that we've ever seen the patterns of emotion directly physically linked to human genetic material. Well, fear is a long, slow wave of emotion. So this wave of fear is a long, slow wave and touches relatively few sites on this DNA. So an individual living in fear is limited to the number of antennae that they have available to them, whereas an individual living in the pattern of love, this is love in DNA, you can see it's a higher frequency, shorter wavelength. We have many more potential sites for coding along that genetic pattern. This information, this is amazing. This is the first time we've ever had a hard digital link between emotion and genetics.
This is important to understand because another researcher named Vladimir Popanov measured tiny particles of light called photons inside a vacuum tube. The photons were scattered as expected. A sample of DNA was then entered into the vacuum tube and they measured the photons again. They found that the particles of light aligned themselves along the axis of the DNA. Then, as they removed the DNA sample, the photons remained aligned to the same form of the DNA even though no DNA was present. This is what is known as the phantom DNA experiment. Science has now bridged a very important gap between physical and ethereal, or spiritual. Our emotions directly affect the structure of our DNA, which directly shapes the physical world we experience every day. So the messages left by the ancients that we've explained here were more than just prophecies about a one-world government or a new world order. We now understand why the study of the heavenly bodies were so important. The rotation and orbit of all that makes up our universe serves as a clock to map changes and transitions. This helped the ancients understand that the change of the heavenly bodies were a mirror to the changes of all existence. December 21st, 2012 is simply a natural transition from one form of energy to the next, the transcendental evolution of man. This date is what's known as 0 point. Our sun, as well as our planet Earth, is losing its magnetic field as the Earth is slowing in its rotation. All the while, its base resonant frequency, also known as the Schumann cavity resonance, is increasing in accordance with the predictable sequence of the Fibonacci theory. At a cellular level, our bodies respond to an electromagnetic pulse. The ancients called this the sacred circuit. The cells receive this pulse from the brain, which receives its pulse from the heart, which receives its pulse from the earth. This pulse comes from the solar system, which from there comes from the galaxy, which ultimately comes from our entire universe. We literally share a pulse with all of existence. Yet another example of everything being one. For as long as scientists have been recording the Earth's pulse, it has remained at approximately 7.8 cycles per second. This was a constant fixed number until 1986 into 1987. It rapidly began increasing to about 9 cycles per second in 1996. So in one decade, it increased by about 2 cycles per second. By 2012, this pulse will be right around 13 cycles per second, just as the Fibonacci theory indicates. What does this mean for humanity? Just as cymatics has shown that higher frequencies result in more complex patterns, we are now experiencing the beginning of a major shift in both physical and spiritual vibration. It's difficult to understand what exactly will happen to our physical bodies, but ancient scriptures, pagan and monotheistic religions, mystery schools, and secret fraternal orders have all given indications as to what this experience will be like. This will be the shift of the ages, the transcendental period of monumental changes to humanity. Those unprepared for this transition will likely not be able to cope with the rapid changes in the psyche. The only way to prepare for what is to come is what we have sought after for our entire lives: truth. Not the truth about governments, commerce, religions, terrorism, or anything external, but the truth within ourselves, within our psyche and our shadow self. Especially in Western cultures, we are taught that being normal means only being happy and never sad, only loving and never angry, only forgiving and never jealous. This sounds plausible, but it is not. We are not meant to repress any negative emotions because it causes imbalance. To conquer our emotions, we must embrace them, not fight them. We must acknowledge them and allow them to serve their purpose as we learn from them. The ancient Essene culture left teachings dating back about 6,000 years. They taught that our relationships with one another, with the universe, and with situations and events are mirrors of the parts of our psyche that need to be cleansed. Author Greg Braden beautifully explains this entire segment at great length in his work. His hard work and understanding of these subjects contributed largely to the marriage between science and spirituality. It is very important to understand that when you fear loss, fear death, fear war, fear terrorism, or fear change, you are giving others the ability to control you based on those fears. When you fight against poverty or against racism, when you fight for relationships or for freedom, you are outwardly attempting to repress that which has been placed before you to conquer inwardly. These situations are mirrors of our fears. This is why it is important to love and only love. Love those who stand with you, but especially those who stand against you. Don't look at your fears as a threat. Rather understand that this material world is only a physical manifestation of either the love or fear in your consciousness. It's as plain as day. All you need to conquer in your life is in your face. If you want to understand what your true inner fears are, analyze your ambitions and your inhibitions. Everything explained here about the esoteric agenda of the elite few at the very top is nothing to fear. They have been at work for thousands of years behind the scenes to manipulate humanity, and it has worked. Until now.
It's very easy for any system of thought, religious or otherwise, that comes along. It's very easy to play on that, to play on our insecurities, to assure us all is well, we'll all be taken care of. We lap that up. So don't blame religion. Blame our own insecurities, which has allowed religion to flourish, and which has allowed so many systems of thought that are disempowering to flourish throughout human history. That's why we can't get out of it.
Ron Sakeley, Department Chairman, Chemistry, University of California, Berkeley, showed that DNA acts as an antenna for cellular upregulation. The primary function they taught us about what DNA is about. It's a receiver and transmitter of photons, light and phonon sound. For what? Cellular upregulation, meaning that they're water molecules, the pyramid power around the DNA spiral energizing strands are taking in the spiritual energy of love vibrations and then sending it out for manifesting, precipitating in a quantum field, the physical matter of the body. These are hertz, frequencies, or cycles per second that the musicians can retune their instruments to play and experiment with. Why? Again, these are the Creator's musical scale, the original solfeggio, buried for 3,000 years in the Bible. So the ancient priests who knew how to levitate the huge stones for the building of the pyramids and the Masonic knowledge that predated ancient Egypt, the ability to have this information, these frequencies, serve the function of creation, destruction, and miracles on behalf of the empowered people who had access to this knowledge. I say that because of this metaphor. This is the difference between the power of our Creator and anything else, particularly evil. That you can go into a pitch black room full of evil, full of darkness, and light a little candle, and instantly that darkness flees. But you can't do the opposite. You can't go into a well-lit room full of truth and wisdom and righteousness and joy and health and harmony with the universal power. You can't take any amount of darkness and go into that well-lit room and have any effect whatsoever. That is the metaphor which I frequently think of when I think that I'm not empowered. It is the greatest lesson for me, and I think for everybody else, to know that we're on the winning side and that we win in the end.
As you are watching this, understand that it is not a fight to be fought. It is not a war to be waged. No gun rights have to be exercised. Not a finger has to be lifted. Most people wonder how one person can make a difference. They ask that if all this is so simple and this information is available, why hasn't someone else conquered their fears and changed the world for everyone else? This is the most difficult and beautiful conundrum to our lives. Your reality affects you and only you. Your curiosity has led you to this genre of information to serve a very specific purpose in your life. To understand visually how the universe is truly a hologram, a math professor at Yale University developed a formula that is plugged into a computer program. Named after him, the Mandelbrot set shows a seemingly disorganized pattern. But no matter how far you zoom into the design, you will always find the same pattern within the whole pattern. Each fractal, broken down infinitely, will always reflect the whole. When one fractal changes its pattern, the sum total of the whole pattern changes along with it. This exemplifies that the whole world does not need to be awoken. There is no race to inform the 6 billion people on this planet of this message. It is only important that you, personally, learn to conquer your innermost fears and learn to love. When you see your fears for what they are and master your emotions, then, and only then, will you truly be free.